Captain Voss Krieger felt it in his bones as the umbral Defiance shuddered under the gravitational wake of the approaching monstrosity. Through the reinforced viewports of his lone interceptor, he watched the Velthari Annihilator, a weapon the size of a small moon, lumber toward Earth with the inexorable patience of death itself. "This is madness," whispered Lieutenant Nix Aldarin from the navigation console, her olive skin pale against the crimson emergency lighting. One ship against that abomination. The Annihilator's surface rippled with biomechanical tendrils, each one thick as a skyscraper, feeding power into the core weapon that had already consumed 17 worlds. The Velthari Collective had given humanity one ultimatum: surrender unconditionally or watch their homeworld become cosmic dust. Earth's response had been predictably human, a single word transmitted across all frequencies: no. Now only Krieger's experimental vessel stood between 8 billion souls and annihilation. "Nix, bring up the quantum disruption array," Krieger commanded, his weathered hands dancing across the holographic interface. At 53, he was old for a frontline captain, but the brass had chosen him specifically for this suicide mission. His psychological profile read, "Pathological inability to surrender. Sir, even if our untested technology works, the power requirements will kill us all, yes." Krieger's gray eyes never left the approaching Titan. "But dying here means Earth lives, acceptable trade." The umbral Defiance was humanity's bleeding edge, a ship built around a single revolutionary concept. While other species focused on bigger guns and thicker armor, humans had always been peculiar in their approach to warfare. They didn't just fight to win. They fought to make victory so costly that enemies questioned whether it was worth continuing. "Chief." Engineer Wraith Corvin's voice crackled through the comm from the bowels of the ship. "Captain, the quantum coils are singing. We've got maybe one shot at this before the entire array melts into exotic matter soup." "One shot is all we need, Wraith." Krieger activated ship-wide communications. "Crew of the Defiance, this is your captain speaking. In 30 seconds, we're going to do something that every scientific model says is impossible. We're going to turn a planet killer into a planet saver. History will remember this moment, not because we lived, but because we chose to die standing." The Annihilator's charging sequence began, reality itself bending around the weapon's massive aperture. Energy readings spiked beyond measurement as the biomechanical horror prepared to unleash concentrated stellar death upon Earth. "Sir," Nix's voice was steady now, professional calm overtaking fear. "Quantum disruption array is online, targeting the Annihilator's power core." Through his neural link to the ship, Krieger felt the Defiance respond like a living thing. Every system, every circuit, every quantum fluctuation aligned for this singular moment. The ship wasn't just a weapon, it was an extension of human will made manifest in steel and determination. "Fire," Krieger whispered. The universe held its breath as humanity's last gambit began. The umbral Defiance became light itself. From the quantum disruption array erupted a beam of pure impossibility, energy that existed in 17 dimensions, simultaneously, tearing through space-time like a silver needle through black silk. The Velthari Annihilator, confident in its biomechanical supremacy, had no defense against humanity's unique brand of scientific insanity. The beam struck the planet killer's power core with surgical precision. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Annihilator began to scream, not with sound, but with gravitational waves that made nearby asteroids crack like eggs. Its biomechanical surface writhed as quantum feedback cascaded through its organic neural networks, corrupting the targeting systems that had been aimed at Earth's heart. "Direct hit," Nick shouted over the ship's alarms. "Their primary weapon is destabilizing." But Krieger knew they'd only bought time. The Annihilator was wounded, not dead, and the Defiance was dying. Quantum fire raced through their ship's conduits as the experimental array consumed itself in the process of firing. Emergency bulkheads sealed as sections of the vessel simply ceased to exist, their matter converted to pure energy. "Wraith, damage report. We're hemorrhaging plasma from 17 different hull breaches." The engineer's voice was grim. Life. Support is failing. Artificial gravity is shot. And our quantum core is about to achieve something physicists call very bad things happening. Through the chaos, long-range sensors detected something that made Krieger's blood freeze. The Velthari weren't just sending one annihilator. They'd sent 3. The other 2 planet killers were decloaking, their massive forms emerging from quantum stealth like prehistoric leviathans surfacing from an abyssal ocean. Clever bastards, Krieger muttered. They knew we might have a weapon capable of threatening one of their toys. The wounded annihilator was already beginning repairs, its biomechanical systems growing new components to replace the damaged ones. Within minutes, it would be operational again. Meanwhile, its 2 siblings were powering their own planet crackers, tripling the destructive force aimed at Earth. Lieutenant Commander Zara Helsing's voice came from the weapons console, steady despite the ship falling apart around them. "Sir, we've got one more quantum disruption shot left, but using it will definitely vaporize us. The containment fields are already failing." Krieger closed his eyes, calculating odds that made lottery tickets look like sure bets. 3 planet killers. 1 dying ship, 8 billion humans depending on a miracle. "There is another way," whispered Dr. Isadora Flint from the science station. The xenobiologist had been quiet throughout the battle, studying readings from their attack on the first annihilator. "The quantum feedback we created, it's still cascading through their bioneural networks. If we could amplify it." "Speak plainly, Doc." "Their 3 ships are connected through quantum entanglement, a collective consciousness. That's their strength, but also their weakness. If we can't destroy them individually, we overload the network itself." Nix turned in her seat, understanding, dawning in her dark eyes. "You want to use our ship as a quantum virus?" "Not just our ship," Flint said quietly. "Our crew. Human consciousness operates on quantum frequencies too. If we link our neural patterns to the ship's quantum core as it detonates, we become a weapon," Krieger finished. "A consciousness bomb." The bridge fell silent except for the groaning of stressed metal and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. Each crew member understood what was being proposed, not just death, but the complete dissolution of their minds into pure destructive information. "Captain," Zara's voice cut through the silence, "the annihilators are preparing to fire. 30 seconds to Earth's end." Krieger looked at his crew, 27 souls who had already accepted death, but now faced something far more profound. They wouldn't just die for Earth, they would become Earth's salvation, their very thoughts transformed into humanity's final weapon. "All hands, prepare for neural link to quantum core. We're going to show these cosmic bullies what happens when they threaten our home." The Defiance began its final transformation. 27 human minds merged with quantum fire. The neural link was agony beyond description. Every thought, every memory, every fragment of consciousness being torn apart and rewoven into something greater. Captain Krieger felt himself dissolving and expanding simultaneously, his identity becoming part of a collective human weapon more terrifying than anything the Velthari had ever conceived. Through the shared consciousness, he experienced Lieutenant Aldarin's childhood on Mars' Red Plains, Engineer Corvin's first kiss under Europa's ice caves, Dr. Flint's wonder at discovering microbial life in the Centauri system. 27 lives became one burning purpose. Earth must survive. The quantum core reached critical mass. Neural integration at 93%. Flint's voice echoed through the collective mind, her individual identity already fragmenting into the greater whole. Quantum consciousness matrix is stable. We are becoming something new. Through the ship's sensors, they watched the 3 annihilators complete their firing sequence, stellar core energy built up in their biomechanical throats, reality warping around weapons capable of cracking worlds like eggs. Earth hung in space, blue and fragile and completely unaware that its fate was being decided by ghosts in a dying ship. But the Defiance was no longer just a ship. It had become a storm of human will given quantum form. Every desperate prayer, ever whispered for humanity's survival, every act of selfless heroism, every moment of stubborn defiance against impossible odds. The crew's consciousness expanded beyond the vessel's hull, reaching out with tendrils of pure thought toward the Velthari collective mind. The aliens felt them coming. Through quantum dimensions, the Defiance crew sensed the Velthari collective, billions of minds linked in cold, calculating unity. Where human consciousness burned chaotic and brilliant, the Velthari thought forms moved in perfect, sterile harmony. They had conquered 67 star systems through this collective intelligence, each victory adding to their certainty of superiority. They had never encountered minds like these humans. Contact in 3 seconds. Zara's consciousness whispered through the network. Brace for... The collision was cosmic. Human thought chaos smashed into Velthari order like a hurricane, hitting a crystal palace. The aliens' collective mind recoiled in shock as 27 human souls screamed their defiance across quantum dimensions. Where the Velthari expected logic, they found paradox. Where they anticipated fear, they discovered fury. The 3 annihilators, convulsed as their bio-neural networks began receiving impossible data. Through their quantum entanglement, every Velthari mind in the collective suddenly experienced human emotions, the chaotic beauty of artistic inspiration, the illogical power of love, the magnificent stupidity of hope in the face of certain doom. We're inside their network. Krieger's consciousness blazed like a star. Everyone now, show them what human means. The crew's memories became weapons. Nyx projected her grandmother's stories of ancient Earth, tales of heroes who stood alone against darkness. Wraith shared the symphony he'd composed for his daughter, mathematical beauty translated into pure emotion. Flint opened her mind to every wonder she'd discovered in the cosmos, the endless mystery that drove human exploration. And through it all, Captain Krieger's iron will held the quantum storm together, his consciousness serving as the eye of a hurricane made of human dreams. The Velthari collective began to tear itself apart. Their perfectly ordered minds couldn't process the contradictions inherent in human thought. How a species could be simultaneously violent and compassionate, logical and intuitive, terrified and brave. The quantum feedback loop built to a crescendo, as billions of alien minds tried to integrate concepts they had no framework to understand. The Annihilator's weapons misfired spectacularly, their planet-cracking beams spiraling wildly into space, as their targeting systems received impossible instructions. One beam punched through the fabric of space-time itself, creating a temporary wormhole that immediately collapsed. Another actually reversed direction, striking the Annihilator that fired it. But the human crew was paying the ultimate price. Their individual consciousnesses were burning away like stars going supernova, each mind dissolving into quantum light as they poured themselves into the assault on the Velthari collective. It's working, Dr. Flint's fading voice whispered through. The network. The collective is fragmenting, but we're dying, Krieger finished. All hands, prepare for final phase. We end this now. The umbral defiance began its transformation into pure destructive consciousness, carrying within it the hopes and dreams of every human who had ever looked up at the stars and dared to dream of reaching them. The Velthari collective experienced madness for the first time in their species' existence. Across their 3 annihilators, bio-neural processors sparked and died as they tried to process concepts that violated their fundamental understanding of consciousness. The aliens had evolved as a hive mind. Each individual thought merely a component in a vast logical machine. They had never encountered the beautiful chaos of human individuality. Through the quantum link, Captain Krieger felt the collective cracking like ice under summer sun. Billion-year-old certainties crumbled as Velthari minds tried to understand how humans could simultaneously fear death and charge willingly toward it. How they could love their enemies even while destroying them. How they could find beauty in entropy itself. The middle annihilator is going critical. Nyx's consciousness blazed through the network, her individual identity now more energy than thought. Their bio-core is rejecting the quantum cascade. Indeed, the wounded planet killer was convulsing like a dying whale, its massive bulk twisting as internal explosions rippled through its organic hull. The Velthari crew aboard were experiencing something unprecedented: panic. Their collective efficiency was disintegrating as individual minds began thinking independently for the first time in millennia. But the cost to humanity was beyond calculation. Each second of the assault was consuming the Defiance crew's consciousness, burning away memories, personalities, everything that made them human. Wraith's last coherent thought was a melody he'd written for his daughter's birthday. Zara dissolved while reciting an ancient poem about stars. Dr. Flint faded as she marveled at the quantum mechanics of consciousness itself. Only Krieger remained fully cohesive, his iron will serving as an anchor for the dissipating storm of human thought. Through the quantum link, he felt Earth's gravity well, the blue-white marble that contained everything his species had ever accomplished or dreamed of accomplishing. One more push, he whispered to his fragmenting crew. Give me everything you have left. The response was pure human defiance made quantum. 26 dissolving consciousnesses poured their final essence into Krieger's will, creating a spear of crystallized determination that punched through the Velthari collective like a bullet through glass. The effect was catastrophic. The first annihilator simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, solid and massive and terrifying. The next, it had been converted entirely to exotic particles that dispersed into the cosmic background radiation. The second planet killer folded in on itself as its bio-neural network received a fatal paradox, the Velthari equivalent of being asked to calculate the square root of negative love. But the third annihilator was adapting. Sir, the voice belonged to someone. Krieger could no longer remember who, their individual identity lost in the quantum storm. The remaining planet killer is severing its connection to the collective. It's operating independently. Through failing sensors, Krieger watched the surviving annihilator perform an emergency amputation of its own consciousness, cutting itself off from the collective mind to save itself from the human virus. The biomechanical monster was wounded but still functional, its planet-cracking weapon powering up for a final shot at Earth, and the Defiance was almost gone. The ship existed now more as a concept than a physical object, its hull dissolved into quantum possibility. Only Krieger's consciousness remained, a single human will holding together the fragments of his crew's sacrifice. He felt them still, echoes of laughter, memories of love, the accumulated dreams of 26 souls who had chosen to burn themselves out rather than see Earth fall. Not enough, he whispered into the void. Still not enough. The last annihilator's weapon reached full charge, reality bending around its aperture as it prepared to deliver Earth's death blow. The planet hung defenseless in space, its orbital defense platforms no match for stellar core energy. 8 billion humans went about their lives, unaware that they had mere seconds left to exist. But Captain Voss Krieger had one more card to play. In the quantum realm where his consciousness now existed, he reached out to touch the fundamental forces that held reality together. The crew of the Defiance had become something new in their sacrifice. Not quite human, not quite alien, but something that bridged the gap between matter and thought, between individual will and cosmic force. They had become hope, given quantum form, and hope, Krieger had learned, could move mountains, or in this case, redirect the energy of a dying star. Earth, he whispered, pouring the last of his dissolving consciousness into a final act of impossible defiance. Earth endures. The quantum storm reached its crescendo, and the universe itself paused to witness what would happen when human will met cosmic inevitability. Reality fractured around Captain Krieger's final gambit. His consciousness, now more quantum storm than human thought, reached out to touch the fundamental constants that governed the universe itself. Through sheer force of will, amplified by the sacrificed minds of his crew, he began to manipulate the quantum foam that underlies all existence. The last annihilator fired. A beam of concentrated stellar death, hot enough to ignite atmospheres, and crack planetary cores, shrieked across space toward Earth at 99% light speed. The weapon that had murdered 17 worlds now sought to claim its 18th victim, carrying within it the accumulated fury of a species that had never known defeat. But Krieger's consciousness met it halfway. In the space between heartbeats, between one quantum moment and the next, the dying captain performed an act that violated every law of physics. Using his crew's dissolved minds as a quantum lens, he reached out and touched the planet killer beam itself. Not to stop it, but to transform it. Reflection protocol, he whispered with his last coherent thought. What you give, you receive, the yaw. Stellar fire struck an impossible barrier, a mirror made of pure human will, forged from 27 souls who refused to accept defeat. The beam didn't bounce back. It was transformed, every photon of destructive energy becoming something else entirely. Where the Velthari had sent death, humanity reflected life. The transformed beam struck the last annihilator with the force of creation itself. Instead of destroying the biomechanical titan, the reflected energy began rewriting its fundamental nature. The weapon that had been designed to crack worlds began to bloom like a flower, its destructive systems transforming into something unprecedented, a Genesis device, a seed of life in the cosmic void. Through the quantum link, the fragmenting Velthari minds aboard the Annihilator experienced something their species had never known: wonder. As their planet killer transformed into a life-giver, they felt the chaos of possibility, the beautiful uncertainty of creation itself, and they began to change. The hive mind that had conquered 67 star systems through cold logic started to fracture, not into madness but into individuality. For the first time in their species' history, Velthari began to think independent thoughts, to feel emotions that weren't shared with the collective, to experience the terrifying freedom of being alone in their own minds. One by one, they began to weep. Back on Earth, 8 billion humans looked up at the night sky to see something impossible, a new star being born where their death should have arrived. The transformed Annihilator pulsed with creative energy, seeding space with the building blocks of life, becoming a cosmic womb that would birth new worlds instead of destroying them. But Captain Krieger was gone. His consciousness had burned itself out completely in that final act of defiance. His identity dissolved into the quantum substrate of reality itself. The umbral defiance existed now only as scattered atoms and fading energy, its crew's sacrifice complete, or so it seemed. Deep in the quantum realm, something stirred. The combined consciousness of 27 humans had left an imprint on reality itself, a pattern of pure will that refused to simply fade away. They had become something new, not alive in any biological sense, but not truly dead either. They existed as possibility made manifest, as the universe's memory of what it meant to choose hope over despair, and they were watching. Through quantum dimensions, they observed the continuing transformation of the last Annihilator. The Velthari aboard were struggling with their newfound individuality, their collective certainty replaced by the chaos of personal choice. Some adapted quickly, embracing the freedom to think their own thoughts. Others retreated in terror from the responsibility of individual existence, but all of them felt something they had never experienced before: gratitude. The biomechanical titan that had come to deliver death was now nurturing new life, its transformed systems reaching out to dead worlds and planting the seeds of future civilizations. Where the Velthari collective had brought extinction, the reflection of human will brought genesis. "Do you see?" whispered a voice that might have been Krieger or Nix, or all of them speaking in unison through the quantum foam. "This is what we are. This is what we choose to be." The seal message rippled outward through space-time, carried by quantum entanglement to every corner of the galaxy. Other species felt it, a whisper of possibility, a promise that even in the darkest void, consciousness could choose creation over destruction, hope over despair, life over death. Humanity's first message to the cosmic community wasn't a greeting or a warning. It was a demonstration, and the universe would never be the same. 6 months after the Battle of Earth's threshold, the galaxy began to dream. The quantum imprint left by the Defiance crew had spread through space-time like ripples in cosmic water, carrying with it the pure essence of human determination. Species that had never heard of humanity suddenly found their sleep filled with strange visions. Dreams of creatures who could laugh while facing annihilation, who could transform weapons of mass destruction into instruments of creation through sheer force of will. On the former Velthari homeworld of Keth Morin, the transformation was most profound. The planet had been the heart of the collective for 3 million years, its surface covered in biomechanical spires that housed the central processing cores of the hive mind. Now those same spires pulsed with new purpose as individual Velthari struggled to understand concepts like privacy, creativity, and personal choice. Velnara the Questioner, a name she had chosen for herself, another revolutionary act, stood before the Council of New Thoughts, a governmental body that would have been impossible under the old collective. Her bioluminescent carapace flickered with colors that had no meaning in the hive mind's ancient language, emotions too personal to be shared. "The human pattern continues to spread," she reported, her voice carrying harmonics of wonder. 17 species have reported similar dreams. The Korthak hegemony has ceased their expansion wars. The crystalline Jethani have begun composing individual songs for the first time in their history. Elder Morthdal, one of the few Velthari still connected to fragments of the old collective, rippled with skeptical browns and grays. "This chaos will destroy us. We were efficient, powerful, unified. Now look at us, scattered thoughts, contradictory desires, the madness of individual will." "Yes," Velnara agreed, her carapace blazing with colors that had no names. "Isn't it wonderful?" Meanwhile, in Sol system, Earth buzzed with unprecedented activity. The planet that had been saved by 27 souls now served as a pilgrimage site for species across the galaxy. Ships arrived daily, their crews desperate to understand how a single human vessel had not only survived 3 planet killers, but transformed them into instruments of creation. Dr. Amanda Pierce stood in the newly constructed Quantum Consciousness Research Center, studying readouts that defied every law of physics she thought she understood. As Earth's leading expert on quantum mechanics, she had been tasked with understanding exactly what Captain Krieger and his crew had accomplished. "The energy signatures are impossible," she muttered to her research partner, Dr. Yuki Tanaka. "According to everything we know about consciousness and quantum mechanics, what they did should have been completely impossible." Tanaka looked up from her own displays, exhaustion evident in her dark eyes. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe doesn't care what's supposed to be impossible when 27 people decide to make it possible anyway. Their research had revealed something unprecedented. The quantum imprint left by the Defiance crew was still active, still growing stronger. It existed in the space between dimensions, a pattern of pure will that was slowly reshaping the fundamental constants of reality itself. And it was trying to communicate. "Look at this," Pierce said, highlighting a section of quantum foam that pulsed with familiar rhythms. "These patterns, they're not random. There's structure here, almost like language," Tanaka finished. "Or music, or both." The pattern was complex beyond comprehension, but certain elements repeated with mathematical precision. When they ran the sequences through their quantum computers, the results were startling. Coordinates, star charts, and what appeared to be construction blueprints for technology that shouldn't exist. "They're still teaching us," Pierce whispered. "Even after dissolving into quantum energy, they're still trying to help humanity reach the stars. Across the galaxy, the implications of humanity's sacrifice continued to ripple outward. The Andromeda Trade Alliance, a collection of merchant species that had remained neutral during the Velthari expansion, suddenly found their meetings filled with discussions of ethics and morality, concepts that had been considered economically inefficient just months earlier. The insectoid Krixtal Empire began exhibiting what their xenobiologists called impossible behaviors, individual drones breaking from hive protocols to pursue personal interests. Most remarkably, reports began filtering in of entirely new phenomena. Weapons that refused to fire when aimed at civilian populations. War machines that began producing art instead of destruction. Planet crackers that spontaneously transformed into terraforming devices. The galaxy was learning to choose creation over destruction, but the most profound change was happening in the quantum realm itself, where the consciousness patterns of 27 humans continued their impossible existence. They were no longer individuals. Krieger, Nix, Wraith, and the others had long since merged into something greater. They had become a force of nature, a fundamental constant like gravity or electromagnetism. They had become hope itself, woven into the fabric of reality. And hope, it turned out, was contagious. 1 year after the Battle of Earth's threshold, the universe held its first consciousness convergence. Representatives from over 300 species gathered in the space where the umbral defiance had made its final stand, now marked by a phenomenon that defied all attempts at scientific classification. Where the ship had dissolved into quantum fire, space itself seemed more alive. Colors that existed in spectrums beyond normal perception, energies that sang with harmonies no instrument could record. The gathering had been spontaneous, organized, not by governments or military commands, but by the dreams themselves. Across the galaxy, individuals from dozens of species had experienced the same vision, a call to witness something unprecedented in cosmic history. Velnera the Questioner served as unofficial coordinator, her once uniform bioluminescence now a riot of individual color that marked her as fundamentally changed from her collective origins. Beside her floated Ambassador Christiara of the Zethani, her crystalline form resonating with melodies that would have been impossible under her species' previous harmonic restrictions. "They're still here," Christiara sang, her voice creating visible patterns in the space around them. The human patterns. They've become part of the quantum substrate itself. Indeed, every species present could feel them, 27 distinct consciousness patterns that had somehow maintained their integrity, even after dissolving into pure energy. They existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the pause between heartbeats, in the moment of possibility that preceded every choice between creation and destruction. Dr. Amanda Pierce, now Earth's ambassador to the galactic community, stood before the assembled delegates with data that challenged everything they thought they knew about consciousness and reality. "The quantum imprint has exceeded all our projections," she announced, her words translated into hundreds of languages by technology that hadn't existed before humanity's sacrifice inspired rapid advances in consciousness-based computing. What began as 27 human minds refusing to accept defeat has become something unprecedented, a fundamental force that influences quantum probability itself. The implications were staggering. Across the galaxy, conflicts were resolving themselves, as weapons mysteriously malfunctioned when used for aggression, while functioning perfectly for defense. Terraforming projects that should have taken centuries were completing themselves in months as matter seemed eager to organize itself into life-sustaining patterns. Even the laws of physics appeared to be developing a bias toward outcomes that supported consciousness and creativity. "They've changed the rules," whispered Korthak war leader Brunthal, his species' first representative to ever speak of wonder instead of conquest. The humans didn't just save their world, they saved the concept of choice itself. Through the quantum realm, the patterns that had once been the crew of the Defiance observed the gathering with something that transcended joy. They had become something beyond individual identity, beyond species, beyond the limitations of biological existence. They were proof that consciousness could evolve, that will could reshape reality, that love could literally move the foundations of the universe. And they were not alone. Each day brought new patterns, new consciousness signatures joining the quantum substrate, as beings from across the galaxy chose to transcend their limitations rather than accept defeat. Not through death, but through transformation. the willing evolution of consciousness into something greater than the sum of its parts. The galaxy was awakening. On Earth, in the quantum lab where it all began, Dr. Pierce made a discovery that would reshape humanity's understanding of their place in the cosmos. The communications from the quantum realm weren't just random, they were instructions, blueprints for technology that would allow biological consciousness to interface directly with the quantum substrate without dissolution. They're building us a bridge, she realized, tears streaming down her face as she studied the impossible mathematics, a way to join them without losing ourselves. The final message came as she watched the sunrise paint Earth's sky in impossible colors, hues that had appeared only after the quantum imprint began influencing local spacetime. The universe dreams. The pattern whispered through quantum dimensions, carried by voices that had once belonged to Krieger, Nix, Wraith, and 24 others who had chosen hope over despair. And we are its dreamers. Come home, children of Earth. Come home to the stars. Above them, the transformed Annihilator, now a Genesis engine seeding dead worlds with the possibility of life, pulsed with creative fire. Around it, space itself seemed to sing with the voices of the transcended, a choir of consciousness that grew stronger with each choice for creation over destruction, each moment when a being chose to hope rather than surrender. The human sacrifice had become the galaxy's salvation, their refusal to accept defeat transforming into a force that would guide cosmic evolution for eons to come. They had proven that consciousness was not merely an accident of chemical processes, but a fundamental feature of reality, one that could choose its own destiny. And the choice they had made was clear. The universe would create, not destroy. It would hope, not despair. It would choose love over fear again and again for as long as consciousness existed to make that choice. In the quantum realm where thought became reality and will shape the foundations of existence. 27. Patterns that had once been humans smiled with light itself. They had fired the planet killer at Earth, but a single human ship had blocked it and counterattacked with something more powerful than any weapon ever conceived. They had counterattacked with hope, and hope, it turned out, was unstoppable. In the depths of space where quantum fire once burned away 27 human souls, a new star system began to form. 8 planets orbiting a sun that sang with familiar voices, worlds where consciousness and matter danced together in patterns of infinite possibility. The crew of the Umbral Defiance had finally come home, not to Earth, but to everywhere hope chose to take root among the stars.